They rigged the election. I didn't rig the election. They rigged the election. What they do is they rig the election, and then they go around getting people and persecuting people and prosecuting people that did nothing wrong. They rigged the election. These are crooked people. Deranged Jack Smith is a prosecutor who was put there in order to screw up the election for the Republican Party.
Donald Trump has been publicly triggered by a federal judge who publicly released a new court document from Special Counsel Jack Smith, making the case that Trump should still be prosecuted for his attempts to steal the 2020 election. And the document includes damning new information that Trump absolutely does not want the public to know about. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we got a couple of clips to look at in this video. Donald Trump is triggered. He is frothing mad, and it really started with a rant on Truth Social. We'll get into the clip in just a moment, but all caps, Donald Trump. For 60 days prior to an election, the Department of Injustice is supposed to do absolutely nothing that would taint or interfere with a case. They disobeyed their own rule in favor of a complete and total election interference. I did nothing wrong. They did. The case is a scam, just like all the others, including the documents case, which was dismissed. Well, what's Trump talking about? Trump is talking about this. This is from Axios. The reason I use Axios is not because they're my favorite, but because they're good at taking comprehensive information and making it much more digestible for those of us with a short attention span. Trump resorted to crimes to try to keep power in 2020, Jack Smith alleges. Special Counsel Jack Smith outlined in a motion unsealed by a judge on Wednesday what he called Donald Trump's increasingly desperate efforts to subvert the 2020 election results. Trump and his legal team had opposed the motion, arguing it would interfere with the November election results. The filing unveils new details in connection to the Republican presidential nominee's January 6th case. U.S. District Court Judge Tanya Chutkan unsealed the redacted motion on Wednesday. Smith in the motion wrote that Trump's scheme was a private criminal effort. He emphasized throughout the document that the former president was acting in his capacity as a candidate, not a president. This is an apparent attempt by Smith to respond to the bombshell Supreme Court ruling earlier this year that said that presidents have immunity for official acts. Quote, at its core, the defendant's scheme was a private one. He extensively used private actors and his campaign infrastructure to attempt to overturn the election results and operated in a private capacity as candidate for office. Because again, you recall, in perhaps the most dangerous Supreme Court case or Supreme Court ruling, certainly in modern American history, perhaps all of American history, this right-wing supermajority on the Supreme Court effectively made presidents kings above the law, making it incredibly difficult, asymptotically impossible to criminally prosecute them. So here we are. Smith also accused Trump of knowing, quote, his fraud claims were false because he continued to make those claims even after his close advisors, acting not in an official capacity, but in a private or campaign-related capacity, told him they were not true, end quote. Quote, at one point, long after the defendant had begun spreading false fraud claims, a White House staffer traveling with Trump overheard him tell family members that it doesn't matter if you won or lost the election, you still have to fight like hell. It's one of the damning juicy tidbits released in this document. Smith also outlined numerous instances of Trump's former vice president, Mike Pence, telling Trump that there was no evidence of fraud. Special counsel wrote that when all else had failed for the former president in his bid to cling to power, he directed an angry crowd of supporters to the United States Capitol to obstruct the congressional certification. He wrote that Trump used false claims about the election to inflame and motivate a large and angry crowd of his supporters to march to the Capitol and disrupt the certification proceedings. But they're saying Trump campaign spokesperson Stephen Chung said in a statement that the filing is falsehood-ridden and unconstitutional, again calling it an attempt to interfere with the November election. Smith filed the sealed document, the legal brief, last week, leaving Chutkan, the judge, to decide whether or not to publicly release it or a redacted version of it. Prosecutors said the brief contains previously unseen evidence. Trump's legal team argued in their own filing Tuesday that more redaction should be made if the brief was to be made public. They also objected to the release timing as early voting had already begun. Prosecutor responded Tuesday saying they have no role or interest in partisan politics. So here we go. Also point out that if the Department of Justice had its way, this case would have been in process and perhaps even resolved months ago. But because of delays made by Donald Trump's legal team and by his right-wing allies in the Supreme Court, we are where we are in the timeline. I should also note that the DOJ did not break any law or violate any rule about election interference. This case The rules are, number one, informal rules are not binding, and number two, they talk about new prosecutions. This case has been ongoing for months and months and months, so it's not a violation of DOJ policy. Now I want to play a clip from Trump himself. He was asked about this recently. He's not happy about it. He's accusing others of trying to steal the election, even though he's the only person in the entire conversation who attempted to steal the election, or an election, that being the one in 2020 from President Biden. This is what he had to say to News Nation.
Now, when it comes to the situation in Washington, D.C. today, I'd be negligent as a reporter if I didn't ask you about this, Mr. President. Obviously, we know that Special Counsel Jack Smith had filed court documents calling your actions in the aftermath of the 2020 election, quote, a private criminal effort. Can you respond to that?
He's a deranged person. I call him deranged Jack Smith. He just lost the big documents case. That was the biggest of them all. They said the documents case, and they said that was the toughest of them all. Let me tell you, we just won it. And it was won strongly and completely, and it was a total victory in Florida.
The one in Florida was dismissed. He didn't win the case. It's not like it went to trial and he was exonerated or he defeated Jack Smith. A partisan judge who was appointed by Donald Trump, Judge Eileen Cannon, dismissed the case because of a concurring opinion in Trump v. United States. Not even the majority opinion, but a concurrence written by right-wing Justice Clarence Thomas, saying that, well, maybe the special counsel isn't even constitutional. Perhaps Jack Smith was appointed unlawfully. So again, not binding opinion at all, just part of an additional concurring opinion by the Supreme Court. And Eileen Cannon used it as the basis by which to dismiss the case, saying, you know what, I don't think Jack Smith was legally or lawfully appointed, even though he was appointed by the same processes that Republican presidents and presidents past had appointed special counsel, special prosecutors. But consistency and internal logic doesn't matter. So she dismissed the case. Again, certainly a de facto defeat for Jack Smith, but not like he lost on the merits. And if that's the logic that's being used, I will remind you that Donald Trump lost the vast majority, 99% of his legal challenges trying to overturn the 2020 election. So if that's the case, then Trump should have dropped this a long time ago and should have accepted the results of the 2020 election, because he was defeated infinitely more frequently and egregiously than Jack Smith has ever been.
And he is a person who is trying, and he works for Kamala and he works for Joe. This was a weaponization of government, and that's why it was released 30 days before the election. And it's nothing new in there, by the way, nothing new. They rigged the election. I didn't rig the election. They rigged the election. What they do is they rig the election, and then they go around getting people and persecuting people and prosecuting people that did nothing wrong. They rigged the election. These are crooked people. Deranged Jack Smith is a prosecutor who was put there in order to screw up the election for the Republican Party. The people know it. I know it. Everybody knows it. And it's not going to happen. They should have never allowed the information to come before the public. But they did that because they want to hurt you with the election. Now, so far, and you know we've had great victories, but so far, what has happened is if you take a look at what they've done, the public doesn't buy it, and my poll numbers have gone up instead of down. It's pure election interference to get an incompetent person like Kamala. She's grossly incompetent. She's more incompetent than Biden to get these people elected. And the voters, they get it. They've read it, they get it. And it's already come out. Every single channel is calling it election interference. Ready? They rigged the election. The election was rigged. I didn't rig it. They did.
Now you talk about
Yeah, so you can see he's clearly triggered. I don't know what he means by every single channel is calling it election interference. That's not true. Perhaps Fox is, perhaps Newsmax is. Donald Trump, again, is the only person in the campaign, the only person in professional politics who's attempted to steal an election, certainly at the presidential level, because he attempted to steal a free and fair election in 2020, the one that he lost. In terms of him winning, again, he may very well, due to institutional advantages or due to unseen political circumstances changing between now and the election. But as of right now, the vice president is dominating in national polls and most of the swing state polls. Her fundraising is dominating his. She beat him in a debate. And even the vice presidential debate, which was the most recent high profile event, most people, and according to most polls, say it was a draw. And as a matter of fact, there's still a seismic distance between J.D. Vance and Tim Walz with respect to favorability and approval, because Walz is so much more popular than Vance. So I don't know by what metric Trump thinks he's winning, but at the moment, he's not winning on any of them. So where we are is this. This case should have been brought a long time ago and would have been brought a long time ago had Trump's legal team not successfully delayed and appealed to their right-wing allies in the Supreme Court, who threw them the most ridiculous Hail Mary in the form of the decision in Trump v. United States, which, again, I think is at least the most dangerous court ruling in modern American history, if not all of American history. The judge made the decision to release this. I should also note that there is no way, obviously, that this will make it to trial before the election. Obviously not. I'll also remind you that if Trump wins the election, he can order the Department of Justice to dismiss the case. Donald Trump will never be held accountable or never see a trial in which he may prove his innocence, right? If he truly is. That will never happen if he becomes president of the United States, because he'll have the legal authority to order the Department of Justice to dismiss the case. He can have Jack Smith fired, and he may even try to pardon himself, right? There's no limit. There's no limiting principle to this man and his cult. So anyway, just delight in the moment, the fact that he is obviously triggered by the facts in this case. I should also say, if you go through the filing, at one point, he is informed that Vice President Pence had to be secured from the Capitol, had to be taken to safety because he was in immediate danger. And Trump is quoted as saying, "So what?" Right? It's stuff like that. More information coming out about his indifference, his callousness, his knowing disinformation, him telling his family, it doesn't matter if we won or lost, we still have to fight. This wasn't about a legitimate concern about free and fair elections. It was a transparent attempt for him to maintain the White House for his own aggrandizement, his own personal security, his own grift, right? Because you should also remember that Trump didn't divest himself of his businesses when he became president of the United States, unlike an infinitely morally superior man like Jimmy Carter, for example. President Carter sold off his peanut farm, divested himself of his peanut farm when he became president. Donald Trump maintained, financial ties to his businesses, and his businesses benefited enormously from his time as president. So this was all about taking power. This was all about keeping power. The election was free and fair. Donald Trump couldn't accept the outcome, and we are where we are because of his personal decisions. So I definitely urge you to check out the document. I'm sure we'll be doing subsequent videos about it. And in the meantime, of course, let me know what you think in the comments.